Thank you. I have been stopped by my son, by the way, on the road. Honestly, I have. He did not give me a ticket, but we don't need to talk about that. I'm excited to be here. Steve last night said that Gail Good looks forward to this week more than any other week of her year. And I'm thinking, no, it's next week. She looks forward to it more than any other week of the year. And she said, yes, that's true. Yeah, we know she'd be lying if she said otherwise. I'm glad to be back. If you remember 2 years ago, how many of you are new to me? New to me. Wow. I actually have to prove something up here. 2 years ago when I was here, most recently, you know I do this every other year, and then I take study trips with students the opposite year. I was in Bad Boys, remember 2 years ago. And literally last Tuesday night, I woke up in the night with a sore throat. There is no way I'm going to be able to do this, and I prayed fervently. And then went to the doctor, but come dawn, and I'm much better, so anyway. So we'll be able to talk this week until I can, and then we'll see what happens. So I was going to do some stuff later in the week. He, by the way, I think, finished his master's in history since he was last here with you. Yes. And he wants my job, and I tell him I'm not done with it yet. So hang on. Just give me a few more years. Literally. A few more years, I'll be good. I'm excited about the topic. Again, you may remember 2 years ago, I think I announced the topic for this year then. Does anybody remember what I said 2 years ago we'd do? You probably don't remember what we did 2 years ago. Wait, I said to somebody at McNeese, I said, let's do Abraham Lincoln in 15. Well, I can shift. I can move to Lincoln instead. Well, we can take all this down and we'll put up the other stuff. You know? I was asking in the meantime, once the museum stuff started showing up and all that, if I would do Rome, and I said that I would. Am I up high enough on this? No. My neck was short enough. You can hear me good. Is that okay? Why don't you just speak up a little bit? It's better? Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's 30 seconds we'll never get back. But anyways, I have to do Rome instead, so here we are. Talking about some people. Look, when I talk about, so thank you. That's a lot easier than me modulating it. When I talked about Civil War 4 years ago, I love the Civil War. There's just a lot of stuff. Of course, it's a lot of nonsense going on, and a lot of death and destruction, and a lot of treasure for a good cause. 2 years ago, we talked about the American Revolution. That's about us. 6 years ago, I talked about Lewis and Clark. Love Lewis and Clark. Let me know when you want me to do that one over again. We'll do that one again. Roman Empire. I'm just not attached. I'm not attached, but it's important because it does connect to us. You just have to take a trip to Washington, D.C. to think about Rome. You'll see Rome on the floor of the Senate. On the wall, there's a fascine, this rod-covered axe, symbol of ancient Rome. There's Mussolini corrupted into fascism. We are celebrating, we are commemorating, we're noting, we're memorializing World War II, World War I, the 100th anniversary of World War I right now. Does that matter? Yes. It does in a lot of ways. But just think about, in World War I, you had two world leaders, two European leaders, whose names are derived from Caesar. What were they? Kaiser? And the Tsar. The Tsar. Does that begin to address the potency, the legacy of the Roman Empire? You've got people centuries, a millennium and a half since there was a Roman Empire, that They're still entitled referring back to it. Is it relevant? Then no. Is it relevant to us today to do comparisons? This is where it gets dodgy, real tricky, because you can argue historical facts any direction you want to and apply them to what's happening to you today. You can be right and you can be wrong. Do you worry about those kinds of comparisons? There's always somebody who's ready to say, America is at this point in the history of Rome. America is at this point in the history of Rome. America is at this point, and at that point you're just right on the edge of the Roman Empire's collapse. Does that make you nervous? You need to be aware, nervous. I'm sure we'd be nervous about something more important than that. But there are appropriate relevant lessons for us. We're going to look at a lot of people you're not going to like. There are a lot of historical figures I'd like to have a lunch with. I'd like to sit down to a meal with these guys. Go to a coffee house with them. Nero's not one of them. That's an encounter that would not go well. And I'd probably get killed. This guy, Julius Caesar, I think I'd like to share lunch with him. There's not everything about him I admire, but there are some things that I do. Just like to know what he's thinking. Just like to know what he thought about power. If he was corrupt or not. He winds up on the wrong side of it. Our revolution ends with the founding fathers dying in their beds or on the battlefield. What these guys do is absolutely sometimes nuts, insane, sometimes literally insane. There's a lot to not admire about what these guys do. Yes, ma'am.
Wasn't he the one that had something like 10,000 of Celts' hands cut off or something? Mm-hmm. So they could never war against him again?
10,000 hands of the Celts cut off. It starts there. That's a slow day. We're going to talk about some good stuff too. We're going to talk about government and it being different and there being a republic before there's a Roman Empire. We usually contextualize Rome as an empire. It's almost always the way we think about Rome as an empire. But for as many years as there was an empire, which is half a millennium, I mean, just think about that. We're sitting here at a point with the United States not half as old as the empire was when it ended. And then you throw in the republic that precedes it, another half millennium. We're talking about 1,000 years, which is hard for Americans to grasp. Our historical memory is very short. When you say 1,000, it just doesn't compute for us. 1,000 years of Rome in ascendancy and ultimate decline. I want to make sure we understand here that when it comes to empire, all empires come and they go. And let me make the editorial comment that's the most important one I think that we'll make all week. And by the way, I hate following John Clayton. Crying out loud, John. Can you just mess up a little bit tomorrow? Make life a little easier for me. Empires come and go. Men like this JC come and go. There is one kingdom that has come and will never end, founded by that JC that matters. That's eternal. We're going to talk about him. This world in which, not quite overlapping, but close to it, you have men like this, and you have men like that. You have gods with a little g, you have gods with a capital. G. This is a strange world here where we talk about Rome, and yet in the middle of all this, almost literally in the middle of all this, as the Republic is ending, as the Empire is beginning, in comes Jesus Christ. I talked to my Western Civ students about this. I say, you know what? Just when everybody on the planet, or at least in the Western world, thought Rome is the center of the world, come to find out, it's not. It's a little backwater, who cares, nowhere, provincial, dusty little town called Bethlehem that's going to make all the difference in the world. Rome is gone. God lives. Now, with all of that, that's where we're headed. We're going to run through Republic and Empire. We're going to cover 1,000 years of history and a bit, because we're actually going to tail end this thing with looking at when Rome actually collapses. It's only the western half that collapses. Do everybody know that? It's the western half that falls apart. The eastern half just chugs on like nothing's changed, and to some respects, nothing did. And that empire becomes one empire, by the way. They thought they were Rome, but they're something else. What historians call that empire that keeps going? The Byzantine Empire. Byzantine Empire. Byzantine Empire keeps going. It doesn't fall until 1453, May 28th, or 9th. It was a Tuesday, so whatever. Look that up, by the way. It was a Tuesday. That's the day Constantinople fell. We'll end with that. So I've got a buttload to do here. Let me just signal ahead kind of how this is going to run. I'm going to do these 2 hours this morning. I'll do 2 hours tomorrow morning. On Wednesday, by the way, too, tomorrow morning at the 10 o'clock hour, Amber Soderholm, who is directing our museum project downstairs, and I think, did they get a tour tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay, tour tomorrow. She's going to bring some stuff up from the storeroom. Nothing's on display right now. It's all in the storeroom. It's all humidity modulated, and it's all kinds of cool stuff. She's just doing fantastic, absolutely fantastic work. Amazing work. I have nothing to do with it at all. People keep asking, how's the museum going? I'm not the guy to ask. It's Amber Soderholm. But anyway, we're going to bring some stuff up on Tuesday, and we'll set it up on one of these tables someplace, and you'll get to see some kind of common everyday life stuff. On Wednesday, we'll do the same thing. We'll bring up military stuff. Because when you talk about Rome, you cannot go very far before you have to talk about military stuff. You can't create an empire on... Mind if we take you over? Anybody in charge here? Anybody want us in charge? Show of hands. No, it's about the military stuff. So we'll have some military stuff up here. Noah will then talk for one of the class periods on Wednesday about military stuff, because honestly, he knows 100 times more about the Roman military than I will ever know. And it's just, it's absolutely incredible what he is aware of on this stuff. So he'll be one of the class periods on Wednesday. Then I'll come back after the field trip on Thursday, and then I'll do 2 hours, and we'll wrap up on Friday. So that's a lot to do. That's a lot of ground to cover. So I'm going to fly here for about a half hour-ish, okay? You've got the handout, which is pretty much what I'm covering in the class. I'll go off the page from a lot, actually. But anyway, that's your guide, basically. You can follow on the page as you want to. You can just listen to me and dote on my voice if you want to. Again, we're going to look at some stuff on screen, too. So I'm going to fly here for a while. So watch your page, hang on. I know a lot of this is going to be new stuff for you, but we'll just pretend that you're my average Western Civ student who doesn't know diddle about what we're talking about. So, okay. Here we go. Look, we'll get this place on screen. We start there. We end with everything pink. What a strange color. It should be red or black. We start with this little place here that nobody for hundreds of years gives a hoot about. It's nowhere. It's nothing. It's nobody. They haven't accomplished a thing. Nobody cares about Rome. Rome is only a little place surrounded by other little places that, again, nobody cares about. And what you're seeing here, of course, is the eventual imperial Rome. This is the largest extent of the Roman Empire. And some of that comes and goes, and sometimes it happens in pieces and dribs and drabs and things like that. Let's understand that before Rome is Rome, before Rome is Rome, there are other empires, there are other kingdoms. Like what? What comes to mind? Greece. Greece, the world of Greeks, the city-states, Egypt down here, which is going to be a waning empire. Even Scripture tells us that. The broken reed of Egypt. Mesopotamia over here, what largest will be the Persian Empire, which is a huge empire. Very similar to what the Roman Empire becomes, by the way, in terms of how they defeat people and very militaristic. And they won't make them change their religion and stuff. And they'll keep their local kings and things like that. They'll just say, you pay us tribute, and we're not going to have any trouble here. Basically, that's what Rome does. What we're going to see here, and I'm looking at material that's formatted differently than yours, which is really a problem for me, because I always wanted my class to say, okay, top of the right-hand column, but that's not what's going to match up to your stuff. So, look, what happens is about 1000 BC, we get folks wandering onto the Italian peninsula, from where, most of the time we don't know. There's going to be some dominant groups for a while before the Romans become the Romans. So we start here. The powers before Rome is Rome are going to be the Etruscans. Down here in the south will be the Greeks. Over here, the Carthaginians. Those are the three groups we have to watch first. The Etruscans to the north, the Greeks to the south, which is a lot of city-state stuff. It's always city-states with Greeks. And then the Carthaginian Empire, which is the Phoenician Empire, who worship Baal. Okay, same folks. They established Carthage about 800 BC as a trading colony. The Carthaginians are all about trade. The Romans look down on it, but that's where the money comes from. We don't know much about the Etruscans. You can see on your page. It is where we get our word Tuscany, by the way, and the Tyrrhenian Sea as well. Rome, in terms of a city-state, is really going to begin as a village. Again, just a small little place among a number of other Latin villages. It's all what's called Latium, because they're Latin-speaking. And just think about that by itself. We talk about the impact of Rome in Western history. How important is the language? It's very important. So many of our words come from the Greek or from the Latin. So it's really important stuff. So we've got the Etruscans, the Carthaginians, the Greeks, and then we get down to about the 700s, and Rome starts stretching its muscles. Now, it's very localized. It's a very small frame. There's not that many people paying any attention to it. In the 700s, there's nobody running the Persian Empire who's going to say, oh, what about these guys in Rome? They don't know anything about that. Carthage couldn't care less what Rome does locally. Not on the radar. Won't be for quite a while. What Rome is going to begin to do here, though, is to stretch its muscles, extend its military. Part of that's about being challenged by other folks locally, other Latin city-states, folks like that. They're not this full-blown militaristic state yet, but they're on the verge of becoming that. They're starting to become that. And then we get eventually the Etruscans, who have tended to dominate over these folks for hundreds of years. You get down to 1 year, 509 BC. In 509, you have basically a weak Etruscan kingdom, and the Romans understand that, and they're going to start pushing against them. They're going to use some of these other Latin city-states as allies and things like that. But eventually they're going to push the Etruscans out, and in 509, you have a free Rome. The Etruscans have been pushed out, and Rome is on its own hook. Now, it's still just a small place. It's still just a small city-state that is so under-civilized, it's borrowing everything from somebody else. That's one great thing about the Romans is they're great borrowers. They take language, they take culture, they take military, they take philosophy, they take poetry, they take architecture from somebody else. The Etruscans, a lot of them the Greeks. Again, just to make themselves more civilized along the way. Look, for a lot of time here, the Romans were seen as completely uncivilized folks. And compared to your garden variety Greek, they were. Who are these guys? There's actually just these language differences, in fact, where the Greeks would hear, some of these folks like the Romans speak, and they would just, what kind of language is this? And to the Greeks and to others, when you talk about these uncivilized folks like the Romans, who to the Greeks so much just sounds like so much bar, we would say what? We would say blah, blah, blah. And this is where we get our word. What's the word we get from that? Barbarians. The barbarians. Their language is just so much bar. But hang on. What you'll see in this section that should be titled, I think, The Roman Republic, is going to be the process by which they're extending out their power. Now, that material is going to tell you about the Etruscan. It's going to tell you about the Celts or the Gauls. Rome is so underdeveloped as a nation state and as a military state that here in the 4th century BC, you will have this very primitive, literally barbarian culture. These guys are just nomads mostly. They have no real culture at all. They're just warriors, basically. And they come down from somewhere, who knows where, somewhere in the north. They come down onto the Italian peninsula. And you'll see the date here, July 16th, 390 BC. That's a very key date in Roman history. This is, again, is where Rome is Rome. Here come the Gauls. Here come the Celts. A specific group of Celts called the Gauls. If they're the Gauls that we know, historically, those are coming from France. So we know it's France, basically. Okay? They come down, attack Rome, come down south of the Lea River, 10 miles from Rome, and just crush them. This is Rome losing a battle. These guys aren't that great in terms of military tactics and stuff, but they're just fierce warriors. And the Romans are so ill-adept at this point in terms of military, they just get kicked. They wind up in a valley, a long, narrow valley, wrong place, wrong time. The Celts are on both sides on hills. They come streaming down, pouring down, just crush these guys. It is an absolute crushing defeat for Rome. In fact, for a long time, you'll read here that July 16th was an unlucky day to the Romans. Now, when they emerge from that, and they will, because, look, these barbarians come in from nowhere. They bring in nothing. They have no culture of depth. They want gold exclusive. That's all they're after is gold. They hang around for a while. They eventually say, here's 1,000 pounds of gold. We'll get out of your hair. The Romans do, of course, pay. Probably the Celts are savvy enough to rig the scales, and they probably actually take more than 1,000 pounds of gold. But anyway, eventually those Celts take off and go back to the north. Now, when all the dust clears from that, and this is important, this is 390 BC, this is still early Republic stuff, the Romans will look at what happened to them, where Rome has been sacked. And they will say to one another, never, ever is that to happen again. And they will resolve to change and become more militaristic. And then we have to ask the question, that's fine, but just to say, we got to do better in the next fight, that's one thing. But based on what? I'm going to show you. Because look, isn't the ultimate question here, why Rome? Why Rome? Rome is a nowhere, nothing, little bitty pipsqueak place, other Latin city-states in its vicinity, and for hundreds of years, it wasn't even the dominant Latin city-state. But Rome rises to absolute tremendous power. Based on what? What's so special about these guys? Isn't that important to know? Why them? Well, part of it begins here. Now, part of it, too, by the way, is with establishing the Republic. They're ruling themselves, and I think that's important. But in terms of this military stuff, they're resolved. That cannot happen again. And so we're going to see Rome strengthen itself. We're going to see Rome resolved to never be destroyed, to become the destroyer instead. And what I want to put up on the screen here are what I believe to be 4 of the most important traits of the Romans that will make them Rome as we know Rome. All right? And they're these things. We talk about the Roman virtues. Now, we say the word virtue, that usually means something different to us. In the Latin, the word we're using here is virtu, or virtus, and you can see how that translates. It doesn't mean necessarily a positive, morally good quality. It means the quality of being a real man. And we're going to get real sexist here real fast. Okay? Rome pursuing values based on manliness. Some of that's got to be about war, doesn't it? These are what make a man a real man. These four. Now there are others, but I think these are the four most important ones. And they take these dead seriously. Things like gravitas. Now look, we get words in the English language that come from these. Excuse me. Gravitas, our word grave. Not like in the ground, but what do we mean when we say grave? Someone is a grave person. Serious. Dead serious. Sober-minded. Boringly sober-minded. Almost harsh in how serious. They can't take a joke. They wouldn't tell a joke. Dead serious. The sober seriousness of being a real man. This is important. This is serious stuff. You haven't got time for this namby-pamby nonsense. You want to be invaded again and crushed by the Celts? I'm not going to do that again. Gravitas. Religio. We get our word religion, obviously, from that. What does that mean to them? Common beliefs that bind people together. Common goals. Common objectives. Things we share. We think in those terms too, don't we? We as Americans tend to have a secular religion. Based on what? Liberty, freedom, choice, vote, representation, some element of democracy. That's stuff we take very seriously. It's to some of us a religion. You know some folks are. You know, for a lot of us, I don't overstate this, our faith is first, our patriotism is second. Maybe our family works in there somewhere, but you understand what I'm saying. We may not be very too far from that as Americans. Maybe a lot of people are. The third one is fideus. We get our word fidelity. Being true to your responsibilities. Living up to your responsibilities. Doing your duty at all costs. When you get on the battlefield and you take that kind of thing seriously, you don't surrender. And when you do, with Rome, you're in big trouble. The fourth one is pietas. Our word piety comes from that. Respect for established authority and tradition. This becomes about Rome, tradition, common goals, patriotism, shared objectives. We're all in this together. We can beat the world. And they do. I think that's part of the answer to the question. Why Rome? Why not these guys? Why not the Samnites? Why not these guys over here? Because Rome is going to pursue these kinds of dead, serious, sober, get in there and do it at all costs, to the death, if that's what it means. Now, look, you get enough guys to buy into that thing. This is a terrible comparison to make. It's the best I can give you. Nazis. Are there some crazy ideas going? Yeah, but when you get a big buy-in, as long as we're in, as long as we're on the same page, look what they accomplish. I'm not saying hooray for the Nazis. I'm just saying, look, there has to be a buy-in on the part of the German people to accomplish what they accomplished. You've got to take yourself pretty serious as a country to take on Europe. And that's what these guys are going to do. So I think that's a really big deal. Now, we can talk about military and how they arrange a military, and all those things are going to be important too. But again, I think these qualities are going to be very significant. Okay, back to your pages here. Defeated by the Gauls, they'll then take about the next 100 years, and they will conquer everybody in close proximity. All the Latin states, most of the center region of the Italian peninsula, not all of it yet, but for 100 years they're going to conquer most of Italy. It's trial and error. It's using their military one way and adapting it to something else. Again, if the Romans are great borrowers, they're also great adapters. They'll go into something and say, well, that worked and this didn't. We need to change this up. We need to do it this way instead. There's a lot of that goes on with Romans. By the time you get down to 290, they're controlling almost all of Italy. Now, look, that's not just a cakewalk thing either. This is hard fighting. This is rough stuff. The Samnites are not, these neighbors to the east, who are over, actually over here. They're rough. This is killer stuff. But they defeated them, and once they defeat the Samnites, it's a little bit easier after that. It's a continual slog. It's an endless slog. They're fighting almost all the time. In season, they don't fight year-round. They don't fight in winter time. But they fight spring and fall. The last big campaign here is going to be when someone comes to after them. Last big campaign is not in your notes, but the last big campaign is a general named Pyrrhus, Pyrrhus. He comes from Greece. Over here. Comes over here, Epirus. All right. He comes across the Adriatic, and he just decides, oh look, if we don't attack Rome, they're going to attack us, so let's take it to them. They'll get allies in the region, the Macedonians buy in on everything, and then off they go. Now, what I want you to see about the Pyrrhus campaign, again, this is going to be in the 270s, is the numbers of troops. This is where we are in the 270s, okay? He's going to invade Rome, the Italian peninsula, headed toward Rome. He, by the way, was the second cousin to Alexander the Great, so I think he thought he was Alexander the Great too. But anyway, he's not a bad general, by the way. But when he comes to Rome, into Italy, he will enter with these numbers. He will bring in 3,000 cavalry. He will bring 2,000 archers, and that's a big deal. Remember, we're talking about kind of a pre-artillery age here, so your archers are important. He will bring 500 slingers. What does that mean? That's what that means. Those guys are deadly accurate. You'll see, I think on Wednesday, we're going to bring up one of these, what are those called? Those little gizmos on the slings. Slingstone? Just slingstone? I thought I had a more fancy name than that. Slingstone. I wonder how long it took them to name that. But anyway. It's a cool little piece. But these guys, you get slogged in the head with one of those. It really doesn't matter what kind of army you're wearing in your head. You're going to get a concussion. That's 500 slingers, 20,000 infantry, 20 war elephants. He has tanks. Add all that up, about 26,000 men. Does it sound like a lot to you? It's a good number for that time period. Again, we're talking about 3rd century BC. That's going to be nothing later on. This is gigantic armies by comparison later on. Look, he has some success. He wins some battles. Which is actually a term we use for the battles that he actually wins. What's that term? For Pyrrhus's victories on the battlefield. It's a term we use for that. A Pyrrhic Victory. Familiar with that term? Pyrrhic Victory. Anybody know what that means? You look like you know.
Hollow, empty victory.
Yeah, it means it was such a cost. It just cost us way too much. We won, but wow, we can't take too many victories like that. In fact, he'll actually say that after 2 wins against the Romans, he takes so many casualties. He says to his other generals, if we win too many more battles like that, we're done, because we're losing too many guys. That's about as good as it gets with anybody standing in the way of Rome on the Italian peninsula from that point on. Once we get past Pyrrhus, again, it's a big challenge, but once that's gone, they're running the show in terms of the Italian peninsula. Now, let's take a break from that, and we're going to take a little bit of time here. I'm going to go ahead and take 10 minutes on this. Cut your break a little short. Let's look at government. We're going to cut just some sidebars here. Government, family, and religion. Then after the break, we'll come back and we'll do the next thing. I'm so dry from Sudafed, I just... Anyway. You can go ahead and bring the lights up if you want to. We're away from the macro for a while. Let's look at Roman government. And part of this is going to relate to us. Part of this we're going to see terms that are familiar to us. What you'll see here is that once the Etruscans are thrown off, that was, of course, a monarchy mostly. Although there's a lot of blending of these kinds of things, too. You get monarchy and tyranny and some democracy and there's all kinds of stuff. Anyway, they throw off the kings, and then they're going to replace them with elected officials called consuls. We don't use that term in the same context today. But what they're going to do is they're going to have two consuls functioning at a time. And basically have veto power with one another. This would be like having, these comparisons are always awkward, having two presidents, and one can veto the other one. Is that a good idea or not? Yeah, Republican and Democrat, I would assume that nothing would ever get done. Which, by the way, forget I said that. It's too early to make comparisons to ourselves. Look, this isn't just a free-for-all. These are guys coming from the upper class primarily, what we call the patrician class. These guys who have land, that's where the money is in that time period. It's in land, it's in farming, agricultural production, sheep, those kinds of things, basically. That's where the money is. So if they have land, the patrician class usually, and then those guys will be the ones that will be the consul. Then the Senate. They create a Senate from the term senex, okay? And which meant old man, basically. So we talk about the older, more mature, presumably wiser, patrician class of people who are in the Senate. Then you're going to have these consuls that have, as you can see, they're chief executive, so like a president. Again, the comparisons are always awkward. But they also have judicial power. Wow. Let's imagine President Obama, who would also be the Supreme Court. No, let's not. Let's not do that with any American president. I don't pick on Obama here. Unnecessarily, but anyway. But that's the kind of structure we've got here. We're not to that three-part system yet. Look, the Greeks had it, but the Romans aren't quite there yet. We also have this other class of kind of lower class folks called the plebeians or the plebeians, and these are going to be folks like most of us. Common people, maybe small farmers, artisans, craftsmen. Now look, eventually we're going to get a viable middle class here, and these are going to be folks that become kind of your big traders, your big shippers, bankers, although Rome never has enough banks. Merchant, big merchant class, these kind of big fat cat kinds of guys. Okay, so sometimes these two categories of patrician and plebeian, look, almost the only difference is going to be in terms of what makes you upper class is you own more land than somebody else. And that works for a while, but when you reach a point in Rome where it's not about how much land you own, because think about that. The more Rome conquers other people, it has access to food outside of its own existence. Does that make sense? So if you have an economy based on agricultural production or class based on agricultural production, how much land you own, we reach a point where that doesn't matter anymore. They can bring all the food they want from the outside. They control everybody. Why would they need to have farmers who produce food? Well, they don't. And actually, eventually, what agriculture becomes about in Rome, if they even do it, it becomes a slave thing. It becomes the colonized. These folks are basically serfs, pretty much, bound to somebody else's property, doing all the heavy lifting. Well, you don't care. Look, it's not going to be about it. Look, here's a huge gap, I think, of what happens. Rome is built on these farmer soldiers. These folks who have enough land, maybe not a lot, but enough land to be able to afford to outfit themselves in the gear and then go off to war. Not as a professional soldier, not as a constant, full-time, that's my job soldier, but as a part-timer. Somebody who leaves production, leaves the fields, puts on the stuff, goes out and fights, engages the campaigns, and when it's all over, takes off the stuff and goes back to being a farmer. But the more Rome conquers other people, the less Rome is reliant on those kinds of people because they're not producing the food they used to. They don't need to. They can get all the grain they need from Egypt. Does that make sense? Once Rome starts separating out from the roots of the kinds of people that established the republic, then they're in trouble. You start disregarding these regular, solid, farmer, soldier kinds of people. That's a huge deal. Now I'm getting ahead of the story here. Look, we've got the plebeians. They're going to be fussy about the power embodied in the patricians. Eventually they're going to reach a point where they say, why not us? Because, look, they can go off to military campaigns, but they can't represent anybody in terms of position of power. So eventually we're going to have the patrician, or the plebeians, by the 400s. So that's fairly early in the Republic. I mean, established in 519. They're going to get these representatives called tribunes. So consuls tend to come from the patrician class. Tribunes come from the plebeian class. Okay? And basically those guys have the power to veto on what would be considered unlawful or unfair acts by the patricians. Now, there's also another big thing happening here, too. And that's going to be the creation of Roman law. This is one of the most important parts of the Roman legacy. Your laws today are based on, in this country and in the West in general, they're based on the structure of Roman law. The way this happens is they put a committee together. They're lucky they got anything done at all. And these guys will put together what's called the 12 tables, or the 12 tablets. They may have literally been tables. They may have literally been carved onto what would look like tables. They're just horizontal tables. We don't know for sure. Some sources say they're wooden, some say they're bronze, doesn't matter. What they're going to do here is create 12 tablets that divide out the structure of Roman law. Now, I'm not going to go through that, I don't have time. If you want to see how that works out in details, I've got a copy here you can borrow. But it creates criminal law, identifies what a criminal act, civil law, tort law, how courts should operate. It's all fantastic stuff. And that's what our law structure is predicated on today. We've inherited that from Rome. We inherit some good stuff from the Greeks. We inherit some good stuff from the Romans, too. The other thing that we need to be aware of here is that when we talk about the Roman, and by the way, the date for that is around mid-5th century, so it's about 450 or so. The thing to understand about republic here is, when we talk about the Roman Republic, look, are we a republic?
Yes.
Yes. But we are, I think, a real republic. You know, there are countries on this planet today that call themselves a republic. Like it used to be the old People's Republic of China. But that's a communist country. I mean, what? Who voted? Who's being represented, and who put those people in power? It's not about any of that. It's not about real republicanism. I think we live in a real republic. The Roman Republic is only a republic to a point. It really is about elite power. It's really about oligarchical power. Power at the top, it's where it's embodied. But there's some good elements here, but it's not going to be a republic that we would be comfortable with. We kind of like our republic, a real republic. There's one more thing here in the last part of this section, and that is the connection between what I'll call church and state, because you know what I mean. There's a real close connection here. These folks presume that the state has to be in line with the gods. What the state does, the gods have to sanction that, to sanctify that in some way. So they're always caring about what the gods, are the gods with us, supporting the gods. You'll have a priesthood that is connected to the state here. Again, it's not an exact church-state kind of deal, but there's not a separation of the two by any stretch. There will be eventually a title called, did I skip it? Is it here? I thought it was here. Oh no, that's on the Roman religion. A title called Pontifex Maximus. And that's going to be a high priest kind of position who actually is connected to the government. When Julius Caesar is actually running Rome, he will be a Pontifex Maximus. Now, you may not think about him in terms of being a religious leader, but in the context of the Roman religion today, he was. Okay? Let's look at family here very fast. Family is, as you would assume, based on the dad. It's a patriarchal society. In the extreme, the term you'll see here is the patria potesta, the power of the father. That's an extreme level of control. Under Roman law, fathers always controlled their children. They always had the last word over their children. It doesn't matter if you're 80 and the son is 60, you are still over that son. And that's by law. You may think you're still over your son. Not by law. And this is to the point to where by law, if that son doesn't abide by his father's decisions, even again, old age, when the son should be well on his own, may have grandkids of his own, and he'd be executed, he'd be killed. That didn't happen every day of the week, but by law, that's the way of instruction. For women, it is not a comfortable world. Now, they may have abided by it, not comparing it to anything else. But this is a world in which women are basically raised to be childbearers. They do not pick their spouse. This wouldn't be that unique in the ancient world. And certainly not something we'd be particularly comfortable with. But again, they're choosing their spouses for these girls, engaging them about age 12, marrying them very soon after that. Expected to have children as soon as possible. We're talking about 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. This is very common stuff. There's not a love relationship inherent in that. Dad has picked your spouse. Girls, would you like that to have been the case? Your dad picks your spouse? We had a student here from Sri Lanka a few years ago, and she said at one point, well, I'm going to go back to Sri Lanka, my dad will pick my mate. We were kind of, really? She said, really, that's okay. She said, I trust my dad. You know, he loves me. I think he'll make a good decision. Wow. Go, girl. Anyway, what you're not going to see, by the way, on the page here is the high infant mortality rate, which is very common in the ancient world. We're talking about generally 80% infant mortality rate. It's presumed that in this time period, the average Roman woman would have to give birth, and listen to this, to 6 children just for Rome to maintain its population. Not to increase it, to keep it without losing population. 6 kids per woman. Well, okay, that's about infant mortality. It's about losing kids at a very young age. Look, you can live in the Roman Empire and the Roman Republic to be 100 years old. Some people did. A lot of people were dead before they were 30. So real low lifespan. Okay, you're in your 20s, you're middle-aged. Sounds wacky to us, but there's almost no childhood. So anyway, okay, I got to fly here. I'm just going to kind of skip over real fast Roman religion. We all understand, I think, the Romans borrowed gods from the Greeks. They just renamed some of them. They're so lazy, though, sometimes they don't even bother to change the names. Apollo and Pluto, some of these other gods, they just keep those Greek names. A couple things real quickly. One, there's not much of a moral framework to Roman religion. It's really about appeasement of the gods and trying to figure out what the gods are going to do to you next. It's just kind of, there's all kinds of religions. That seems like a crazy one to me. There's a priesthood, there's not sacrifice, there's not human sacrifice in the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic either. It will be from time to time, very, very rarely though. It's not generally part of their thing. Again, the highest priest is the Pontifex Maximus. What does that make you think of, by the way? Let's say Pontifex Maximus. The Pope. The Pope. Eventually we're going to see that there are reasons why Rome becomes the center of the Catholic Church. We reach a point here when, as Rome is declining as an empire, look, power doesn't function in a vacuum. Somebody's going to have to presume power instead. That's where the church begins to step in. As Roman political power declines, the church's ecclesiastical power will increase. Okay, I got to stop there. I got to get a break here. Let's take, yes, sir.
These values that made them great, where did they come from, and how did they get everybody to sign on?
That's the $64,000 question. I don't know the answer to that. What made us buy into revolution in the 1760s and 70s? Whose idea was that? Who caused, well, to a point, yeah, who caused so many people to agree at that point in time, yeah, let's go. Why then? Why then? Why us? Why are we the first real republic?
They got their values. They had to get those values
Yep.
from somewhere.
Yeah.
Did they get
Well,
them with religion or something?
I think part of it is they are living in a hard world where it is kill or be killed, get your head on straight, quit whining. We've been whipped and beaten, and they've been in our streets, for Pete's sake. Do we want that to be what we're known for? Rome's the place to invade. Look, Rome becomes the place to invade. We talk about the latter days of the Roman Empire. Everybody wants to sack Rome, and practically do. But I think there's a resolve here that just says, look, we got to kick in now. It's now or never. I can't give you a better answer than that because I just don't know if we can identify that. But.
Well, it's a pretty hard life for everybody.
Oh yeah, it's a hard life for everybody. Yeah, the ancient world is rough for everyone.
They need to be responsible, they need to be, there wasn't much room
Yeah.
for frivolity
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
you just had to survive.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the, as far as we know, in the Western world, the origin of the notion of republic. Plato wrote an ideal.
I'd say blame
But
Plato.
what's it?
Yeah, blame Plato. Because in part, even Plato's concept of what he means by a republic, which is not our concept of a republic, is going to be run by what? By a philosopher king. I think to a point, Rome is going to be okay with that. I think there's going to be guys who will be philosopher kings. They'll be emperors, really, but by title. But a guy like Marcus Aurelius, I think he is the embodiment of Plato's philosopher king.
How far back does the notion of republic, is it traceable?
I don't know that you can take it much further back than the Greeks. I think the sources get pretty sketchy at that point. But
Roman republic antedated.
yeah. I think we talk about Eastern, we talk about republics. Some form of republicanism in the Greek world prior to this. Yeah.
Personality of leaders like Hitler come along at the right time, lead people.
Yeah. Right guys leading the right time. Yeah.